he anchors the present. He knows who lived in every house, not just who sat in every pew in the Kiever. He was the guy who signed the application, the first application to become a councilman for Jack Layton. He was the guy, along with a social worker and a priest, who stopped the demolition of Kensington Market when it was threatened. He's the guy, and you'd never know it to look at him. He's the guy who walked away from his own personal career to save a legacy for the entire community. It's embodied in one man.
Chapter 6, you'll see Dave Pinkus is mentioned as one of the street fighters. And it's rather strange. I was a pretty introverted, brainy kid, you know. Not involved with community affairs. I was very bookish and introverted, and not the leader of a community. You would not believe it, but just in back of me was a synagogue on this facility here, set back from the street. It was called the Beth Leda. It's now on Gilgorn Street in Forest Hill. If you look across the road, you'll see the evolution of the area. Apartments with the stores on the ground there. This was all housing, remember, at one time. Everything was housing. Well, that's the future of Kensington.
What do you think of this story?
Well, you're getting a degree of gentrification coming in. I guess it's in keeping of the future. There's no doubt about it that Spadina and Kensington were a beehive of political activity. And the tendency was either liberal or left-wing. A little bit after Saul Alinsky. He was a social activist in the Back of the Yards project in Chicago. We were activists, you know. That was not my nature, but I guess I was fighting for community. So really this community could have disappeared if we hadn't stood our ground in the 1960s and 1970s.
Here, say hello to Max.
Okay. My problem is it takes me a long time to get home, not only because of the broken hip, because people are always stopping me to talk. My brother gets pretty angry. He says I talk too much. I never know from one moment to the next what additional demands are being placed upon me. He is 100 plus. I'm 88. I don't think they expected another child. Must have been some happy occasion. I can only figure it must have been around Simchas Torah or something. My longest involvement has been with the synagogue since my parents were founders of the synagogue, and it's a great feeling to buck the trend of the previous generations to divorce themselves of heritage buildings and to move on and forget about the early history of the Jewish community. And we're going to be severely criticized as the years go by of leaving no vestiges of the Jewish community in the ward, or very little. And also very little in our area as well. Stained glass window has a central Roman building, so-called Star of David. And the shul has an abundance of stars of David. You have them mounted on the exterior fence and in some of the stained glass windows. We moved in the late May or early June of 1927. So we've been here for 85 years. It so happens that the Kiever Shul, the edifice that you now see, was erected in 1927. These crafted light stanchions are symbolic of the tree of life, the Eitz Chaim. And you'll see that the base of the socket is composed of leaves, petals. The arms are the branches of the tree. Since we can't show human depiction in the Orthodox synagogue, Rabbi Langner insisted that, who was our rabbi at the time, insisted that we make certain changes. So for the Gemini, the sign of the twins, in which you see two siblings, normally together, they were removed, and just the two hands clasped here, symbolic of that. And here in the sign, there's a dove that's been placed here in place of the normally female. Sometimes you press the wrong button. It's a microcosm of what Canada really is, a multitude of different ethnic groups. It says here, Kensington Market recalls the history of the Canadian urban experience in the 20th century. I like to think of this area with open arms, welcoming the poor, almost a Statue of Liberty of Canada. You know, the words on the Statue of Liberty were written by a Jewish poet. A woman, I forget what her name was. Kensington is like that, welcoming the poor masses with open arms and helping them to integrate into the great Canadian mosaic. It's unique. This is unique because there are very few areas that have been recognized in in Canada as a historical site.